The doorbell echoed through the hallway, 3 sharp, rapid chimes that pierced the air like a warning. I paused mid-step, the sound carrying an edge of something unnatural. 2 unfamiliar men stood at our doorstep, their expressions blank, movements rigid, like they were waiting for the moment to strike. No one needed to explain anything. I could sense the threat without a single word being spoken. An invisible pressure weighed down on my chest. If I didn't stand my ground now, I feared I'd lose more than just peace of mind. Our neighborhood had always seemed peaceful. A little suburban haven filled with neatly trimmed hedges, cheerful cookouts, and familiar faces exchanging friendly waves. I taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, enjoying the steady rhythm of early mornings and classroom chatter. My wife, Sarah, 38, was quieter by nature but well-respected, having served the local police department for over a decade. I'm Mike Thompson, 42, a man who thought danger was something that happened elsewhere. But all that changed when Karen Williams got elected. Karen was 44, always decked in overly bright floral prints, armed with a clipboard, and brimming with self-importance. When she assumed control of the Homeowners Association, it was as if she'd crowned herself ruler of Willowbrook Estates. At first, everything seemed typical. Well-kept lawns, identical houses, and neighbors who exchanged holiday cookies and gardening tips. Karen seemed harmless enough, knocking on our door one afternoon with a tin of brownies and a pamphlet detailing HOA rules. Her tone was overly sweet, her smile too fixed. Something about her felt manufactured. The first hint of trouble came from something as trivial as parking. Sarah, due to the demands of her job, often parked her cruiser at the top of our driveway for quick departures during emergencies. We didn't think much of it, it was practical. But practicality wasn't part of Karen's regime. On a sunny Saturday morning, Karen reappeared, this time clad in an eye-watering yellow top that screamed authority. Per HOA guidelines, she chirped, clipboard in hand, cars are not to remain in driveways longer than 2 hours during the day. Sarah, ever calm, offered a polite nod. Understood, but this is required for my job. Emergency response can't wait for garage doors. Less than a week later, we received a formal violation notice, a $50 fine for what was described as a visual disruption to community harmony. Sarah glanced over the notice, let out a quiet laugh and muttered, "She clearly hasn't tangled with federal code before." I didn't realize it then, but Sarah wasn't just shrugging off the HOA. She was assessing the situation, calculating. Karen's behavior escalated from petty rule enforcement to flat-out surveillance. She called her prowling community wellness checks. But we knew better. She lingered near our yard, snapping pictures and scribbling notes. We were hit with a series of absurd citations. Noise disturbances, despite our house being dead quiet by 10 p.m. Fencing violations that didn't exist, and accusations of improper landscaping even though our yard mirrored every other one in the cul-de-sac. One afternoon, wearing a blood-red blouse that matched the hostility in her tone, Karen marched up with her clipboard. "Numerous complaints have been made regarding disruptive activity at your residence," she stated with performative concern. Sarah smiled, a smile I'd come to recognize as her version of a warning shot. "I'd love to see those reports. Maybe include the exact municipal statutes you're invoking as well." My curiosity got the better of me that evening. I started digging through county records. What I found stunned me. Karen wasn't just a micromanager with a power complex. She had a history. 3 lawsuits had been filed against her in recent years by families who'd accused her of harassment and coercion. One case was still active, citing intimidation tactics and malicious use of HOA policies to bully people into selling their homes. When direct pressure didn't work, Karen turned to manipulation. She started hosting informal coffee hours, where neighbors gathered in pastel kitchens and gossiped over muffins. Karen, always in floral and always with a well-rehearsed look of concern, planted seeds of doubt. "Something's not quite right with that woman," she'd whisper, referring to Sarah. "Police officers usually carry themselves differently. Don't you think she's hiding something?" It worked. The once warm smiles of our neighbors turned into cold glances and awkward silences. People crossed the street when we approached. Invitations stopped coming. Even Mrs. Peterson, the sweet widow who used to gift us tomatoes from her garden, began drawing her curtains the moment we stepped outside. Then came the March HOA meeting. It felt like the final act in Karen's twisted play. Dressed in a forest green blouse and wearing her hair in tight waves, Karen took the floor in front of a room full of residents. She launched into what sounded more like a prosecutor's closing statement than a routine update. What she said next would change everything. In the last 8 weeks, Karen stood before the assembled residents with her clipboard, rattling off a list of so-called community violations: incorrectly parked vehicles, excessive noise, unsightly decorations, and neglected yards. She spoke as if she were delivering a final verdict, ending with a sharp suggestion that perhaps our family didn't belong in a neighborhood committed to peace and mutual courtesy. The room grew still. Some neighbors shifted in their chairs, unsure. Others nodded as though they agreed. Through it all, Sarah sat quietly, hands clasped, dressed in her usual navy turtleneck, her face calm and unreadable. When Karen asked if anyone had questions, Sarah gave a serene smile and said, "Thank you, Karen. Your thorough notes will come in handy." I had expected Sarah to be furious or at least shaken. But that evening, I found her in the home office, speaking on the phone with an unfamiliar sharpness in her voice. "Yes, I need a full profile on Karen Williams," she said evenly. "Criminal records, assets, tax filings, anything tied to federal alerts. I'll send clearance codes within the hour." I stood in the doorway, stunned. Her poise, the authority in her tone. It became instantly clear she operated on a level far above the jurisdiction of any small-town officer. She noticed me and gave a slight, knowing wink. "Also check for shell corporations, hidden transfers, use federal-level scanning." Karen made her boldest move the next Tuesday. She arrived at our front porch flanked by 2 men in poorly tailored suits, introducing them as private security. Her deep purple blouse puffed proudly, hair lacquered into a helmet of platinum curls. She looked like she had come prepared for war. "I've tolerated your family's non-compliance long enough," she announced, clearly reveling in her imagined power. "But I won't allow it to continue. If you refuse to follow the rules, I'll involve the authorities. Arrests for trespassing, harassment, and breach of community policy are all on the table." Sarah stepped outside to meet her. Her outfit was the same familiar navy turtleneck, but something in her posture had shifted, subtle, but undeniable. "Are you sure you want to escalate this to law enforcement?" she asked quietly. Karen's eyes lit up. "Already did," she gloated. "The police chief is fully briefed. 1 call from me, and you'll be in custody before dinner." Karen Williams was about to learn an unforgettable lesson. Never challenge someone when you have no idea what kind of firepower they're hiding. Later that night, Sarah sat at her laptop, this time wearing a crisp white shirt. Her demeanor had transformed. The calm was still there, but now there was focus, dangerous surgical focus. "Did you know Karen has assets tucked away in the Cayman Islands?" she said, not looking up. "And she's been diverting HOA funds into her private accounts through her husband's fake landscaping company. Classic laundering structure." The information she accessed was staggering, layers of activity hidden behind bureaucratic smokescreens. Wire transfers, fabricated work orders, signatures forged with expert precision. Karen had siphoned over $45,000, all disguised as community improvement costs. The money was rerouted from phantom projects, through her husband's firm, and finally into private and offshore accounts. But just as we were ready to present our findings, Karen tried to erase the trail. At an emergency board meeting, she announced that all HOA digital records had been lost in a catastrophic system error. Wearing a blinding orange blouse and flashing a disarming smile, she told the crowd, "We'll start fresh, with improved backups moving forward. Our insurer is already informed." To most, it sounded like unfortunate misfortune. But we knew better. That night, salvation came from an unexpected source. Tom Martinez, our neighbor and the HOA's treasurer, showed up at our house with a worn flash drive and an anxious expression. "I couldn't watch her steal anymore," he said. "She's been bullying me into covering for her. But I've been saving copies of everything. Off-grid." Inside that flash drive were months of financial records. Every shady transaction, every doctored invoice. It was the final piece we needed. Just as we began building our formal case, a new complication surfaced. Karen showed up again. This time in a burgundy floral top, hair curled to perfection, looking like someone who believed she'd just won. Her voice was smooth, falsely kind. "I hear you've been reviewing some interesting documents from Tom Martinez," she said with a tilt of her head. And in that moment, everything clicked. Tom had been feeding her information the entire time. He posed as our ally, pretending to assist in uncovering the truth. But the USB he handed over was laced with falsehoods, fabricated data designed to discredit our claims and paint us as delusional troublemakers spinning wild conspiracy theories about a respected community figure. Karen had successfully turned Tom into her puppet. Unbeknownst to us, he fed her updates on our progress while supplying us with bogus evidence to lead us astray. We weren't just back at the beginning, we were now exposed. Karen knew we were investigating her, and she had the upper hand. But what I hadn't accounted for was Sarah's calm resolve. Where I expected frustration or fear, she let out a small laugh and dialed a number that changed the course of everything. "Director Thompson here. Initiate domestic operations under Financial Crimes Division. I'm transmitting clearance codes now," she said into the phone. My wife, it turned out, had been orchestrating an entirely separate investigation, using federal resources I hadn't even known she had access to. For weeks, federal agents had been surveilling Karen's financial activities, compiling a case strong enough to hold up in court. Wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, charges serious enough to land someone in prison for decades. Then Sarah introduced me to someone I had seen countless times around the neighborhood without ever realizing her role in our story. Jennifer Park, a federal prosecutor who had lived just down the street the entire time. She had quietly worked with Sarah to collect admissible evidence and had documented every incident of harassment, building a prosecutable case piece by piece. The turning point came from the least expected place, Karen's own surveillance system. Sarah had managed to access and extract private recordings from Karen's home security feed. The footage included candid meetings between Karen and the rest of the HOA board, laying bare their financial misconduct, coordinated bullying, and exclusionary tactics. In one recording, Karen detailed how she used threats and sustained pressure to force out families she deemed unfit for the neighborhood, while also explaining exactly how she'd been siphoning HOA money to fund personal luxuries. The audio was undeniable. There it was: intent, action, motive, and planning, all captured in Karen's own words. Her grip on the neighborhood was unraveling, and she had no clue it was coming. Sarah arranged for a surprise HOA meeting, framed as a platform to resolve escalating tensions in the community. Karen, believing it was her moment to crush our reputation once and for all, agreed enthusiastically. When the day came, Karen showed up wearing a bright yellow floral blouse, her hair perfectly styled, oozing confidence. She was ready for a show of dominance. But this time, the script had changed. The community center was packed, with more residents in attendance than ever before. Karen had spent days rallying her supporters, assuming her narrative would prevail. She was about to be blindsided. Sarah opened with a single, disarming question. "Karen, can you explain the $15,000 you allocated last September for renovations to a community pool that doesn't exist?" Karen blinked, then offered a polished response about planning costs for future amenities. But her tone had shifted. Her self-assurance was cracking. Sarah continued, projecting financial statements onto a screen. "And what about the $30,000 payment to Green Valley Landscaping? A business registered to your husband for work that was never performed?" The crowd stirred. Whispers filled the room as neighbors started to realize what they were witnessing. Karen tried to recover, insisting she hired the best contractor available and that all the work had been done. But it was Sarah's final reveal that delivered the fatal blow. Direct bank records showing $78 $000 in unauthorized transfers from HOA funds to Karen's personal account over the past 14 months. No words could excuse that. No explanation could make it disappear. Karen lost control. She stood, voice trembling with fury, accusing Sarah of slander and impersonating law enforcement. She screamed into her phone, demanding police intervention. And when officers finally arrived, she pointed directly at Sarah, commanding them to arrest her. What happened next silenced the entire building. Sarah calmly stood, handed over her ID, and spoke evenly, "I'm Sarah Thompson, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm here tonight as a resident, but I'm also here to see justice done." Shock rippled through the room. Karen went pale, eyes wide with disbelief. She had been harassing a federal director, someone with national authority, unrestricted access to investigative resources, and the full weight of the law behind her. But the surprises weren't over. Jennifer leaned over and whispered to me, "This whole thing is being streamed live." As it turned out, the entire meeting was being broadcast via the HOA's official social media page. Over 300 people were watching. Every lie, every outburst, every accusation was now public knowledge. Karen's fall was swift. Her desperation became hysteria as she shouted about a broader scheme, insisting we weren't her only targets. But her words only confirmed what everyone already knew. She wasn't a victim of slander. She was the architect of a long-running campaign of corruption, intimidation, and fraud. She didn't just lose her power that night. She lost her freedom. She admitted to orchestrating a calculated campaign of harassment and intimidation, targeting families she deemed unfit for the neighborhood. Her actions had driven 5 households from their homes, each departure the result of relentless pressure and abuse of her power within the HOA. Her goal had been clear: reshape the area into a gated haven of privilege, designed for affluent white families who would never challenge her rule or question the discrepancies in the HOA's finances. "You were the final name on my list," she confessed, her composure unraveling. Her voice cracked as she spoke of her vision. A so-called perfect community, sanitized of diversity and opposition. In that moment, she revealed herself as the architect of a cruel and calculated operation to both exclude and exploit, silencing voices, displacing families, and funneling community funds into her private luxuries. What she didn't realize was that her confession was being streamed live to an online audience and overheard by dozens of shocked residents. Federal agents, who had been monitoring the operation closely, swept in and placed her under arrest on charges ranging from wire fraud and money laundering to racketeering and hate crimes. Her carefully curated public image collapsed as she was led away in handcuffs. Her once pristine yellow floral blouse now soaked in sweat and creased by panic. The arrest marked the end of a long and painful chapter in the neighborhood's history. The case was led by federal prosecutor Jennifer Park, whose airtight presentation of evidence resulted in a conviction and an 18-year prison sentence. The judge emphasized the gravity of her actions, citing her use of power to target families based on race and income as a violation of federal civil rights protections. Her husband, who had funneled stolen HOA funds through a fake landscaping business, also faced prosecution. Their assets, including their home, luxury vehicles, and offshore accounts, were seized to repay the community. Tom Martinez, once a trusted HOA treasurer, was exposed as a mole who had sabotaged the investigation from within. When his duplicity became public, he was removed from office, arrested, and left the neighborhood in disgrace. The betrayal hit the community hard, but it also solidified their determination to take back control. A special election was held to replace the entire board. This time, the residents voted with clarity and resolve. Jennifer Park, now a local hero, was unanimously chosen as president. Her first actions were swift and sweeping, implementing financial transparency protocols, mandating that any spending over $500 be approved by residents, distributing monthly financial statements to every household, and requiring a democratic vote for major decisions. She also established a rotating grievance panel to ensure no one person could ever again exploit the system. Under her leadership, all HOA meetings were recorded and made publicly available, ensuring total transparency. "We're done with dictatorships," she said firmly at her first meeting. "This community belongs to all of us now." The families who had been forced out were contacted directly and invited to return. Apologies were made, legal aid was offered, and moving expenses were covered. One by one, the families returned. The Rodriguez family, who had been ousted over fabricated noise complaints against their children, were the first to move back. Their arrival was met with a block party in their honor, a symbolic rebuke of the fear that had once ruled the streets. The Patel family, formerly targeted for supposed lawn violations, came back to find a neighborhood that now celebrated diversity. Mr. Patel even joined the new HOA board, lending his background in finance and activism to the community's new era. "I feel like I'm back in the same house, but in a completely different world," Mrs. Rodriguez said during a neighborhood barbecue. "People wave now. They smile. There's no fear anymore." Though the community had been stunned to discover that Sarah, our close neighbor and trusted friend, was actually a high-ranking official in federal law enforcement, they quickly embraced her. She turned down the presidency, citing her national responsibilities, but offered to serve as the community's unpaid legal advisor, helping ensure future boards operated within legal bounds. "I may work in Washington," she told the new board, "but I live right here. I care just as much as you do about keeping this a safe, fair place to raise our families." My own job at the elementary school took on new meaning. Students proudly told others that their teacher's wife worked for the FBI. Sarah would occasionally visit my class for career day, encouraging kids to dream of service, justice, and leadership. Even our school principal, initially unsure about the high-profile attention, grew to appreciate the opportunities Sarah's presence brought to our small district. 6 months after the downfall of the corrupt HOA, residents used the recovered funds to replace the old board office with a community-designed memorial garden. Proposals were submitted, and the winning design was voted on by residents. The space now blooms year-round with native flowers, and a bronze plaque reads, "Justice Garden, a reminder that truth will always triumph over abuse." Sarah and I often take walks there, hand in hand, watching children laugh and play freely. The contrast to the past is stark. Where once neighbors were silent and suspicious, they now host potlucks, community projects, and volunteer drives. Everyone is seen. Everyone is heard. One evening, as we sat on a bench surrounded by vibrant blossoms, Sarah asked if I ever regretted that her secret had become public. I laughed and held her hand tightly. "Not for a moment," I told her. "I just wish I'd known sooner. Maybe I would have had the confidence to stand up to her earlier." Our story gained traction beyond our neighborhood. Media coverage and viral posts turned our experience into a blueprint for other communities confronting similar abuses. Jennifer Park's reforms inspired nationwide conversations about HOA transparency, civil rights, and democratic governance. What we all learned, what I'll never forget, is this: true leadership serves the people. It listens, it protects, and it uplifts. Karen's regime was rooted in fear and control. But what came after, what we rebuilt together, was a neighborhood grounded in fairness, diversity, and mutual respect. Karen Williams never returned. Her sentence included full restitution of $95,000. Her home was sold to repay the debt, and her family quietly relocated to escape the notoriety. But her legacy remains, not as a leader, but as a warning. And every time I walk past the Justice Garden and see it blooming, I remember what this place once was, and what it chose to become. Power without oversight will always rot. But when good people refuse to be silenced, justice finds a way to take root and grow into something beautiful.